Mike's hot. We are on Karl Hinett. Welcome to Hour. Glad to have in the studio. At this point, you say, no problem. I'm really glad to be here. I feel privileged.
Thanks, you. Yeah.
Sorry. The icebreaker, mate. I've written down a bunch of notes during that icebreaker from the questions from the platinum subscribers, and so much I want to come on to. However, the first thing I do want to go on to is so you were saying that so you got put into an induced coma, 10-day induced coma, like basically straight after your recovery off the ground in 2005, and that you looked over your notes from that to the medical notes. You got your medical notes now, and you saw that they performed 3 12-hour operations on you during that 10-day induced coma.
Yeah. 3.
What are they doing in 3 12-hour operations? That is crazy.
It's a lot of work. Yeah. So the majority, again, so burn injuries, I had no idea about burn injuries until I was a burns victim. And a lot of it involves replacing the damaged area, what has been burned, with new skin, whether that's skin from your own body or a donor, like a dead, basically, to put it bluntly, a dead person's skin. And so I had a lot of donor skin. I had skin grafts from my own unburnt areas. And what they were doing was, so the worst affected areas of my body, my hands, the palms of my hands, the underside of my arms, the inside of my legs, they were basically cleaning away that burnt area. So they call it debriding, where they'll scrape away any sort of dead necrotizing skin and then put a nice fresh piece of skin and try and suture it down and then like take care of it for it to heal. And because I had a third of my body damaged, all pretty badly, it was 3rd degree or more full thickness burns. So that was down to the muscle. They had a lot of areas to patch up with new skin. And over those 3 12-hour operations, they did a lot of work replacing those damaged areas.
So when they are putting the new skin on, is that full thickness skin they're putting on, or is it the top layer which then grows?
So they do it in 2 ways. So full thickness is, the complete 3 layers of skin. Whenever they take a skin graft as well, they can run it through like this really weird machine where they can sort of like stretch it a little bit to get more of a surface area out of it. And so I have a few scars where they've stretched it and it's got like this sort of like diamond effect where they run it through almost like this cheese grater and stretched it out a little bit to cover a bit more area. But that's normally used for areas where the burns weren't as deep.
Right.
So one of them, I had to have my nose quite heavily worked on. I almost lost my nose. So they had to take like a big, thick, chunky piece of skin off the back of my head and replace my nose with it. So
work. You wouldn't know that.
No.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, it's I had 3 skin grafts on my face, which, for 20 years ago was quite good work. My nose, my forehead and my cheek. They did amazing.
Yeah,
my surgeons.
That is amazing. I mean, especially back then as well. I imagine like that. You see that the big leaps in like battlefield medicine and on the ground treatment, and also in like military hospitals, were made during the height of the Afghan campaign. But it's not true. It was well before that, right?
Yeah,
well before that. I also thought that I had always made an assumption that in the armored vehicles there was fire retardant kit worn. No, not
no. I mean, eventually came out, and then I don't know if you remember when
it wouldn't be practical in that heat of the desert anyway.
No, and remember when they tried to bring in that bigger body armor where it had the sleeves and the
oh my god,
yeah, that was just coming in when we were out in 2005. But now we just had the your standard like waistcoat style body armor, and that saved me for my chest and my back, because petrol. The petrol burns first when it's alight, but because it got into my turret and it was such a confined space, inside there, that heat intensified and it burnt a lot quicker. So luckily, any areas that was closed, the damage weren't as bad. But because I had my sleeves rolled up, I was in a seated position. So when it came in through the turret, a big splash of petrol landed in my lap. Luckily, I was wearing boxer shorts, which saved, the important bits. But because of the position I was in and the confinement of the warrior, that heat intensified so much that it just burned straight through the petrol and straight onto whatever it was touching. So, like, yeah, basically my face, my chest was on fire, but because I had body armor on, my hands, my arms were exposed, and my hands were the worst damage because of having to climb out of the warrior and like sort of grip on to the rim of the turret while it was burning. I pulled myself up, but because my hands almost got stuck on there because of how they were, the white hot sort of heat. And then when I sort of let myself go, it was almost like having to pull all the skin away. Really, it was sort of one of those little bit more pain now to effectively save my life.
Yeah, we did a rescue mission in Afghan in I think it was '06, and it was household cavalry, and there was guys got fused inside the wagon.
Yeah,
I died. Well, one of them died because of it.
Yeah.
Idiots. But I don't think people realize how lethal it is. Well,
yeah,
obviously.
yeah. I mean,
How long did it take your hands to recover to a point where they were fully functional? And imagine that would I be right in saying that they took the longest to recover?
Yeah, years. Even now, they're really weak. Very, very delicate skin. But for years, it was really frustrating because, it was easily over 5-6 years before I could twist a cap off like a bottle.
Oh wow!
Just because like the skin, it was almost like wet tissue. It just tear so easy, and it was really frustrating.
Because it was the grafted skin.
Yeah, grafted, and because it's delicate, but it's always used as well. Because one of the hard parts about recovering as a burns victim was, yes, you have got to sort of relax and rest and recover, but at the same time, if you don't exercise and stretch and use what was being burned, that they'll fuse up, that they'll solidify and tighten as scars contract and pull together, that you'll be left with like unusable hands. So like the physios were like, harder working than any sort of sergeant that I had, during my military, because like they understood, what would happen if I didn't use my hands. So it was the constant use. They were always tearing open.
Was there restrictions? So during those, those early years of recovery, was there restrictions on how much like physical activity you could undertake? Because I mean, like, was there been negative impact on recovery from things like perspiration?
No,
Huh.
no perspiration. Like it was a challenge in itself because where I've been burned, sweat glands got burnt out. So the only thing I had to learn to deal with in terms of physically pushing myself was how to cope not overheating, because now a third of my body can't regulate. So especially in like hot weather, that could be a bit dangerous. But in terms of pushing myself physically, there was no end to that. There was no limit. So I think that's why I really pushed myself in that aspect, because after, doing some physio or trying to exercise my hands, that had a bit of a limit, that did. Whereas like physical exercise, going out for a run, I had unlimited, free reign on that. So that's where I really sort of applied myself.
So do the sweat glands regenerate?
Not really. I mean, so I've not really looked too much into if they can fully recover, but like the areas that I'm burnt and heavily scarred doesn't sweat now at all. So I'm presuming they never recover. But like the areas that have been like lightly damaged, it feels like that sweats now. But yeah, in terms of actual body regulation and heat regulation, um, that that's something that's stuck.
But you've done 170 odd marathons now, right? And a
Mm.
bunch of other stuff. So do you notice the way that that impacts you
Yeah,
compared to other athletes? Like, what are you having
yeah,
to do extra stuff to manage that heat regulation?
yeah. So like my so for example, water intake hydration is completely different now because I'm either sweating loads more because of like the third can't sweat,
So
or
the parts of your body which kind of just sweat profusely, right? Okay, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
or I'm retaining loads of water. So
Mm.
uh, my hydration strategy is really off. You know, I've done ultra marathons before. You know, over 24 hours long, where I've drank under a liter of water, but felt fine. So it's really odd, and it took years to sort of fine tune it, and even now it's still as we get older and as we sort of like needs change. Even now, it's almost like I've not nailed it on the head. Trying to manage um, what I need to sort of really push myself. For like a big race. It feels like a lot of it's hit and miss sometimes.
Well, so for people not aware, at the point of we're recording this, we're about 24 hours or less out from the start of the London Marathon, which Carl is embarking on. So, what's your strategy for this
Mhm.
race then?
But I say luckily, I mean, we still got to do 26.2 miles, and that never gets any shorter. It never gets any easier. But myself and a few of the other lads who've also been wounded in either Iraq or Afghan, we're doing it together as a team. So I feel, I mean, we're not the fastest group, but we have got our reasons. Some of the guys don't have legs. So
Who's doing it? Who's the group?
so it's the Kazibak Club.
Yeah.
We're a bit of a private members club where if you've been injured in Iraq or Afghanistan and got Kazibaked out, that made you eligible for this club. And it got set up really because of we kept bumping into each other, either through Headley Court, having rehab, or through hospital, or at a social event. So now we were brought together as a club to sort of use our experiences to one further advances in medical sort of research, and two raise money for good causes. So that's what we're doing the London Marathon for tomorrow. Is we're going to do it for Make a Wish Foundation.
Mm.
So there's me and five others, I believe, all been wounded, and yeah, we're just looking at getting to the finish line. So speed is not important tomorrow.
Mm. So how do you how have you trained for the marathon? I know I'm asking. There's a bunch of. I mean, there's a few previous guests who are on the marathon tomorrow.
Mm.
There's McConaughey, Chris Blewett, and Shaw, and there's a bunch of people doing it, and there's a bunch of people who do this generally anyway. Um, you should what's your prep been for this? Like, how do you keep yourself ticking over between marathons? And also, in fact, after that, I want to come on to like tomorrow morning.
Yeah,
Now you've got to factor in a 2 hour drive down because your hotel's screwed you over.
yeah.
What's your prep going to be in the morning? But yeah, so when was the last marathon you did?
Actual marathon. I mean, in March I did a 500-kilometer race.
I
Com-
qualify that as marathon. Yeah,
but completely different
ultra
process.
marathon.
Yeah. Actual marathon, like, if I'm honest, the last time I ran a marathon properly, trying to do like good time and everything, because the thing with marathons now is like, oh, how fast did you do it? So when the last time I had that mindset was quite a few years ago. When I do races now, I'm there for the finish line now. So to actually get prepared and to do one, because I'm going at probably like 10% slower, the actual preparation isn't as difficult. So like if you got the mindset knowing, oh, I can finish a marathon, you with just average fitness, I'm guessing, I reckon that anyone can finish a marathon if you're not worried about the finish time. So my preparation and my lead up to it is a bit more relaxed now. I mean, I might struggle a little bit more on this one because after we did that 500k, I went away with my family for 2 weeks and I've had nothing but fat food and and drank beers. So yeah, I'll feel that tomorrow. But
But you
yeah,
on the 500k, that was Fire and Ice with Woody and Foxy and who else was on that?
Aldo
Aldo
Kane.
Kane was on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was a kit, right? Was that a
Oh
kit?
yeah, that
You were pulling kit.
completely different style of race that was.
Like, go on, talk
Yeah.
us through that.
So yeah, we did a challenge called Project Fire and Ice, and the premise of it was a 500-kilometer race that was held in Sweden, and it passed through the Arctic Circle, and the time limit was 10 days, and you basically had to carry everything that you needed to survive 10 days. You know, mandatory kit list, which was tents, fuel, stove, food, you know, water carrying capacity. So we had a lot of, it was about 30 to 40 kgs of weight that
Per
we,
man.
per man, that we pulled on sledges. So, you know, you're going through snow, it's a lot easier to pull it than it is to, you know, carry it on your back. And that took us the entire 10 days to do. That did. So 500k, you thought we could break that down to 50k a day. But then when you're factoring in weather conditions, you know, it got to below minus 25. Days it snowed. Sometimes when it got too warm and when it snowed, it got really wet instead. And, you know, you're in gopping kit, you're soaked through and it's still really cold. The style of terrain, some of the
Like Michael Wilson.
some of the conditions that we were walking through, we had skis, but you know, some of us, myself included, our feet were getting messed up because of constantly on skis. So we were chopping and changing, but that meant, you know, we were punching through the snow sometimes. And so it was 50k a day sort of all of a sudden turned into a bit of a challenge in itself. I mean, we got through in the end, but it was hard work. And at no point did we really run any of that. It weren't, if you say race, you think, oh, a running race. It was a very slow, steady slog and endure through the horrendous conditions of the
Had you
Arctic.
done anything like that before?
Yeah, so I've done similar races, you know, up in the Arctic and down in Antarctica. Not all of them where we've had to carry our own kit, but I've done a race before up in like northern Norway where it only survived 1 year because it ended up being quite dangerous and not properly.
What was the race? Go on.
So it's called Frostgade, and it was basically, here's the start line and here's the finish. You've got 4 days to do 100 miles. We'll see you there. You know, there was like a random, you know, checkpoint somewhere in the middle. But because the course was measured in the summer and we were doing it in the winter, you know, everyone ended up doing like half the distance again on top of what was set out.
Why is that?
Just because of when they were measuring the course, they were going through like forests and, you know, terrain that was passable in the summer.
Okay.
But when winter conditions came, so yeah, that race never survived for
The
another
other thing is
year.
with that is you get, I think, the less limitations you put on things like that, like there's 100 miles, just get and do it. You end up, but maybe I'm speculating. You'll have the experience of it, maybe, where you get lunatics turn up and go, I'm just going to go for it. They've got a hard any kit, they've got no experience.
Yeah.
100 miles, yeah, I can do that. It's
Yeah.
just like, fuck it, go for it. And they're the people who don't finish the race,
Yeah.
don't finish life as long, like as
Yeah.
late as they should.
There was a couple of them, and yeah, there was some emergency buttons being pressed on their Jeep because you know, a lot of these style of races, you normally get given like a GPS tag where, you know, in absolute worst case scenarios, you can press the red button and at some point emergency crews will get to you, you know, not immediately because you're in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, during that race in particular, there was a few people who probably weren't as prepared as they should be, and they ended up pressing the button.
Wow. What's the toughest race you've done? What's the closest you've come to not finishing?
So there was a race called the Jungle Marathon. Now, this Jungle Marathon is set up in the very, very similar style to a very famous race called Marathon des Sables, which I did that Marathon des Sables back in 2016, and that's billed as the toughest race in the world. It's not. I mean, I'm a ginger burns victim, and I did it. You know, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's not the toughest race in the world. The toughest race in the world that I've done, and again, I'll come on to toughest race in the world in a minute, but like this Jungle Marathon was similar setup as MDS, 250 kilometers. You got to carry everything you need, and you got to get to a checkpoint every day. But like the jungle is just horrendous. The environment of the jungle, everything wants to kill you, and it's you know that just the humidity and what we were talking about before, like a third of my body can't breathe properly. So I was piling in. I got bitten by a bullet ant, which it knocked me off my feet. Like I've being bitten by a bullet ant was worse than getting set on fire.
No.
Yeah.
No. Oh my God. That's a strong shout.
Because I got to a point where I was sort of like stumbling along in a bit of a daze because I'd got my hydration all wrong because I was in the jungle. I've never been in the jungle before, and I'm trying to cover 250 kilometers. And I was stumbling along, and I just leant against a tree just to catch my breath. And then I moved on again. And then this intense, horrendous pain got me right on the shoulder, and I looked, and it was this horrible looking massive ant with its little pincers in my shoulder. I freaked out and brushed it off, and then tried to run because, I don't know, I panicked because of the pain, and then I just dropped to my knees, and it was the worst intense pain I've ever felt.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I just looked at the bullet ant pain index. The bullet ant the bullet ant is known for having the most painful sting according to the Schmidt Sting Pain Index, which was created by entomologist Justin O. Schmidt. Schmidt describes the pain as pure, intense, brilliant pain, like walking over flaming charcoal with a 3-inch nail embedded in your heel.
Yeah. Yeah, so for someone who's experienced that and experienced being set on fire, the bullet ant is worse.
So you not been to the jungle before that?
No.
How much time? So how long before the race did you arrive out there?
Probably 2 days before.
Oh my God. That's not great prep.
No. It was, I mean, don't get me wrong, now that it's finished, it's one of the greatest experiences I've ever done. Yeah. But actually doing it was the definition of type 2 fun, where it's fun when it's finished.
That's too fun. I've not heard that before. Yeah, type 2 fun, yeah.
So a horrendous race. I mean, it's not done anymore, but it ran for a number of years, and you had to sign all sorts of waivers, and you had to, wear like shin guards because of snakes, because there's only about 40 people doing it, and 40 people stretched out. You end up being on your own in the jungle, following like a really, really coarsely marked route, trying to survive. And when we had to do like river crossings, they advised us just keep making splashes, so anything that's in there should probably swim away from you.
Oh my God.
But like just
what was it called?
The Jungle Marathon.
What's it called?
Yeah. So
I mean, you reckon it's not going anymore?
No, I did it in 2012, and it was, again, amazing experience. But there's like, beware of pythons, black caiman.
It's back on, mate.
Is it back on?
Back on. This thing's back on. Beyond the ultimate.co.uk.
Oh no, it weren't that one. It was
not that one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That was $3,000 in entry, by the way.
Yeah.
If you're interested.
But absolutely amazing race. But yeah, looking back on it, it was how I survived it. My finisher's photo, I look like a ghost.
Really?
I'm so pale, and I have bandaged hands. I had to use sticks that I found.
Jungle is lethal.
It is lethal. Like just about surviving. How operators operated in it blows my mind.
You make sense now. Why it's the phase after the hills on the Hereford selection. It's like fucking grim.
Yeah,
Real grim. I had
horrendous.
the benefit of going and training in the jungle for a few weeks, and the same thing. Like literally day one, thought this is why this is the place which makes or breaks people. Like
Yeah.
very soldier. It's just horrific. The humidity is hideous.
I mean, it was a part of. I mean, it was so after the core, after the major operations that I had, which was over a 5-year period. After that finished, that jungle marathon was part of a charity endeavor that I went on to raise money for the hospital. And it was during that time where it was over a 2-year period that I ended up running 100 marathons. After that,
in 2 years,
after that big bunch of operations that I had. So after I did the jungle marathon, me and my missus, who's now my wife, because I'd been away for a bit, was like, oh, for the next marathon, we'll go away somewhere nice together. I'll quickly run the marathon and then we'll, have a nice weekend together. So we ended up going to Dresden in Germany. Beautiful place. But like my feet were in such bad condition that like we was trying to have this nice romantic...
This is after the jungle?
After the jungle.
Yeah.
We was trying to have like a nice romantic weekend away, but like all my toenails were dropping off and my feet was like badly infected and everything. It was, she weren't happy.
Oh, wait. 100 in 2 years?
Yeah.
What was the motivation for 100 in 2 years?
I wanted to reflect what care I'd given. I wanted to do something mega and epic to sort of like almost, again, reflect that length of recovery and like dedication and care that I had and received from the hospital. I just wanted to do something massive to repay them. And, I thought running a marathon's cool, but running 100, is much better.
So you targeted 100. That was a target. It
Yeah.
wasn't just you happened to end up at 100 over 2 years. You targeted 100, right?
Mm.
Yeah. That experience must have changed you. I can't imagine at the end of that 100th marathon you were the same person as the first one.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, yeah, sorry, it massively changed me. I definitely wasn't the same person because that really slow process of trying to recover and the initial 5 years of recovery was definitely the hardest because over that time I ended up having 16 operations altogether, and I was in and out of the hospital like a yo-yo. I was going from hospital to recovery time at home to Headley Court, the military defence rehab centre, to have like an intense sort of few weeks sort of recovery program. And it was just a big cycle. And at times it felt like my recovery weren't getting any better. And I sort of felt like I was stuck in a bit of a hole. And then I left the military a few years after injury. I stopped going to Headley Court because of coming out of the military, but I was still having the operations. And then they petered out a little bit because there was only so much they could do on my hands, and they'd received enough trauma as it is. And I was living with my nan who served, and she was like, she understood the military mindset.
You mentioned her in the icebreaker.
Yeah, because she'd served, she completely got me. She understood that, you can't come from a life in the military to sitting around doing nothing. Like, you will spiral out of control unless you apply yourself and do something. And in that period of time, I weren't really in a position to work because I was still, really damaged and sort of not in that mind frame. So she was like, just go see the world. It's what she did. Just go and do something, make use of the time that you've got and go and enjoy yourself.
So she served during the Second World War, I take it?
Afterwards.
Yeah. So she would have been seeing those Second World War guys and seeing how many of those there were sort of, I suppose, spiraling.
Yeah.
in that situation, which is much less understood then, which is that loss of identity, loss of
Yeah.
sense of purpose, and all that we so commonly now, which still now affects people really negatively, obviously.
Yeah.
Wow. So who did you serve with?
My nan,
Yeah.
she was in the Royal Women's Corps. So she was in the, I think that's the name of it.
Was that what it was? The
Yeah,
Women's Corps.
I think it was the
That's
Women's
mental, isn't
Corps.
it?
It was in
God,
very, very early 60s.
Look at it now. Royal Women's Corps. Royal Women's Army Corps. Well, here we go. The Women's Royal Army Corps, sometimes pronounced acronymically as RAC, a term unpopular with its members, was the corps to which all women in the British Army belonged from 1949 to 1992.
Yeah.
That's not long ago. Except medical, dental, and veterinary officers and chaplains who belong to the same corps as the men. Right, so what do they do? What do the women do?
She had like an administration sort of role, but even then, she only served for, I think it was about 5 or 6 years. And she told me how in that short space of time, she'd travelled, extensively. And we'd all grew up in this tiny little town that was Tipton, it's called, in the Midlands, that was famous for its foundries. And so she and that community was very sort of isolated, and she broke the mold by, when she was 19 years old, she went to her mother, my great grandmother, here's military papers, can I go and join the army? And she was like, not at all. But her dad was like, yeah, of course I will. And he signed them, and she went off and then saw the world, and it changed her outlook to a lifestyle that she continued until she sadly passed away a few years ago. And it was because of her sort of inspiration and motivation that I joined the military. I left my factory job, and sort of that idea was planted in my head when I was a teenager that I don't want a factory job. I want to, again, break that mold, because I unfortunately followed the same path as a lot of people in my community did, where we didn't really have good school grades, didn't really have many job prospects, ended up working in a factory job, manufacturing double glazing windows. But she gave me the sort of inspiration to, again, break my own little mold and go for it. And then when I was injured and I returned back home, I moved in with her to live with her. She looked after me, but she looked after me in a way that sort of encouraged me to fend for myself again. So instead of like falling into a bit of a lazy, I'm going to use the word lazy sort of mindset, where I was expecting people to do things for me because I didn't want to hurt my hands. She was encouraging me to sort of do things for myself and sort of like reignite that sort of spark of like wanting the challenge again, what the military gave me. And then once I got past feeling sorry for myself because, I was injured, I was technically disabled now, it was because of her that sort of nudge in the right direction gave me the motivation to, go and fight for it again. And it was because of her stories of when, she served in Germany for a little bit. And she was like, when I had a week off, I just hired a scooter and just went off and explored Germany for a week. Like, no idea where she was going. And that was back in the 60s, and I was like, if my nan can do that, I can do it.
She sounds like
she was
incredible woman.
She was mega. She
like the actual definition of breaking the mold for those times.
Yeah, and she was hard, but like gentle at the same time. She clearly didn't want to see me hurt, but like at the same time, she knew that coming from the military herself, that you can't go from that like mega job role to sitting around feeling sorry for yourself.
How old were you when you got
when I was injured?
Yeah.
So I was 18. Yeah, very, very early on.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So you moved back in with her, what, 19? Yeah,
so when I was about 19, so because my family home, I had two brothers and a sister. It was a very busy household, all younger than me. And my nan was like, got a spare bedroom, we'll deck it out for you, you can recover. And that became my haven for a bit. It was, yeah, just where I needed to get myself back on my feet, deal with the recovery and the trauma of, being injured when you're 18, losing your identity and everything. It was just where I needed. And it weren't, this is one of the things I tell people when, they're looking for some sort of like inspiration or, motivation to do something. None of it happened, in an instant. It weren't just like some sort of like light switch moment where, things are bad and then all of a sudden things are good. It was years in the making. It was something that required lots of dedication, lots of hard work, and lots of sort of like mental focus to sort of get myself in the right sort of headspace and physical sort of condition to go forward, if that makes sense. It was something that, I weren't just holding out for all of a sudden things to get better. It was a scenario and a situation for me that I needed to work at so I could have a better life.
Yeah, it does make sense. It makes total sense. Um, there's, I think we living in a time now where the opposite, exactly what you're saying there, the opposite of that mindset that you've got now is totally acceptable, because things like the kind of welfare state we live in and how easy life can be made for you if you have physical or mental illness or ailment,
Yeah.
right? And I think for a lot of people, it kind of removes that personal agency from them.
Yeah.
They forget that actually, a lot of what's going to happen in your future, most of what's going to happen in your future, your good fortune or your bad fortune, is down to you.
Yeah.
Literally, it's within your control, I think. And a lot of it's mostly mindset. Now, obviously, outside of that, is things that you can't help, and like bad luck and
Yeah.
stuff going pear shaped. But you can, I do believe you can truly manifest a better destiny for yourself.
Yeah.
You can't manifest a specific destiny, not Oprah style, think of the $1 million and you get it. But
Yeah.
you can, it's the positive mindset approach,
Yeah.
right?
And yeah, and it's that sort of thing that doesn't just happen overnight. Like we live in this world where it's like instant gratification or instant results. Like for me, for my story to get from like absolute zero to building myself up to now was a process. It weren't just you know a quick fix, instant results. It was something that you had to apply yourself to. And it was just small changes in everyday life that I try to stick to now. Eat healthy, be active, get outdoors. Be appreciative of what you got. All them things, done day after day after day, is what builds a better lifestyle. And that's something that my grandmother sort of helped instill in me in those early days. And I think it's something that a lot of people forget really when, you're scrolling through Instagram and start getting jealous of, people with all they've got when like, that's not real life, is it? You don't just get instantly rich, instantly famous and all that sort of stuff. Real life requires hard work and you need to apply yourself every day is the sort of lessons I learned.
What was the most challenging, what was the most challenging, mentally the most challenging thing to overcome in those recovery days? Was there any part of, I mean, I'd say you probably now you're like acutely aware of the way your brain works and your emotions and your strengths and your weaknesses there. Looking back, is there any part that was particularly difficult to overcome or change that mindset? Like,
Yeah, I mean, um, so in the early days, being 18 years old initially, and I'm pretty sure it's the same with every 18-year-old. Like it was my looks. When I was injured, I had half of my face burnt off. Um, like I mentioned earlier, you probably can't tell now, but as an 18-year-old, as a lad, shall we say, um, all that had been taken away. You know, it got to a point where I was afraid to go out and show my face and socialize. And the times that I did, in that sort of world of like, everything's dominated by looks, I was failing and I was getting like hideously embarrassed by it. I was, you go out and try and meet a girl when you're 18 years old. No one's interested in the deformed looking sort of monster that's, trying it on in a nightclub setting. It doesn't work that way. So after trying that a few times, because like at the time, your mates try and convince you that, women dig scars and all that, really didn't work that way. It was just a horrendous experience that was really difficult to get over.
How did you do it? How did you get over it?
I, if I'm honest, I don't know. Like it was something that I hid away from for a very long time. And in those 5 years, those initial 5 years of recovery, where I was trying to work through, all these sort of like issues of, how I look, how I can operate, having to leave the military, which I loved, even though it was only a short period of time. Everything changed. My identity was completely gone, and it was a lot to deal with as an 18-year-old. And it was, again, just being with my grandmother and then sort of like being influenced and inspired by her to go out and try things, little at a time, did I sort of eventually get over it. It was, like I said, it weren't a quick process. It weren't like a quick fix. It was something that I had to work at, days and weeks and years at, to finally get the courage and confidence enough to sort of not really care what people think about, well, particularly about how I look, because that was one of the initial biggest fears. But once I got over that, life became a lot easier.
Were you, before you got injured, were you an introspective person before you got injured?
So, yeah, sort of. I mean, like I've never been like, massively sort of like center of attention, outgoing, life of the party. But that still doesn't really change how you feel when your initial impression, your face, your looks, the thing that people are going to see first is taken away from you. Even as like someone who's, quite reserved, when we're young, that's probably one of the most important things about your life, isn't it? It's how you look.
Oh, you think it is?
Yeah, you think
I mean,
it is.
it is a major part.
Yeah.
Of just interacting. Obviously, I'm not to dismiss it, but you think it's the be all and end all.
Yeah. It's only when you get older do you realise that it don't really matter.
Yeah, but I mean, but when I say introspective, I mean, so you're able now to talk with great understanding of your psyche, the way your brain made, how you got through things. Were you like that before the accident? Like, what were you? I think the question really is, what were you like at 17, 18 years old? Who was Karl then?
Well, I was just like any, teenager. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be one of the lads. I wanted to, go out drinking. I wanted to, be with the boys when we go and try and like chat up girls. I wanted to be part of like the military unit where, you bond together in training. You all go out drinking together in training, and that was all taken away from me when I was injured. But like, I just tried. A big part of it was I wanted to fit in, and then that became really difficult when you're not ordinary anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And also at that time, it's on that the looks piece. That was you had Facebook and everything else. Internet was like full blown. Then wasn't it? You had all
Yeah.
the online dating sites. I think because that by maybe at that time. I mean, I always I've always thought that this affects girls much more than as boys, women
Mm.
much more as men on the looks pieces, like awareness of it. But at that time, all that piece was ramping up, so it probably made it, yeah, extremely difficult.
Yeah, because
Extremely difficult.
it's all you care about as a teenager. Well,
You th-
like I said, all you think you care about as a teenager.
yeah, yeah, that, yeah. I would have liked to have met your nan.
She
I'd
she
have
was
liked
she
to have
was
met your
mega.
nan.
She really was. She properly looked after me, and it is purely because of her that I got to where I got to. Because we spoke about like the military gives you the fundamentals, but you've still got to use them, to make them apply. But I definitely got into a hole where I was sinking fast, just because of it felt like things just weren't progressing. Burns victim, you take years to recover. Things weren't moving at a quick enough pace. Very impatient at the time. But it was her who sort of like guided me through, the difficult days where, the skin on my fingers had all ripped open again because, I'd not concentrating properly, or, someone had said something while I've been out walking in the street about how I looked. It was always her who sort of like put me back onto the right path. So she was.
What people say things out loud to you.
Oh yeah, like I've had comments before where like I've been told that I shouldn't be doing as many drugs because like my nose is messed up and things like that. Or
Jesus Christ.
yeah, it's
What,
like
of strangers?
yeah.
I hear
Yeah.
this some. I hear this sometimes. These comments sometimes from other people who are friends
Mm.
who are visibly different
Hmm.
for different reasons. And I always think, wow, are there really people in real life who will actually say these things out
Yeah,
loud to
out
people?
loud.
Cesspit human beings.
Yeah, it was
Cesspit human
horrendous.
beings.
I mean, don't get me wrong. A big portion of them who have like said things maybe were said with the best intentions, but like it never comes out that way. What I remember, one of the first ones that really set me back was like where I grew up. My house and my nan's house was literally 200 meters. And I made the short walk, and as I was making the short walk, I turned the corner, and all of a sudden there was a group of kids, really young, probably 12, 13. And I thought this was one of the first times I'd stepped out after being injured. And I thought that they're going to be terrified by how I look because, I looked like a zombie, my patchworked face, different colors. My hands were like claws, all the skin was taken off and everything. I was bandaged up, and I looked a mess, and I thought they were going to go running off screaming. But what they ended up actually doing was like laughing and, going,
Oh my God.
that mentally, was a difficult thing to deal with. But that was when I was in that mindset of my looks are my most important thing about me. So it was, it was a challenging time.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
But
It's horrendous. What point did you end up moving out from hers then and going
so
solo?
when I met my wife,
When you met
yeah,
your wife, yeah.
yeah. So and that was all. Again, this all stemmed from her encouragement, because after those 5 years of getting the bulk of my operations out of the way, and she convinced me to just go explore the world, almost catch up on missing out on being a late teenager or a man in your early 20s. And that's when like the idea of running 100 marathons for the hospital also sort of like mixed together, and I was like, okay, I'll see the world, but at the same time, I'll just run marathons all over the world and fundraise. And as I was doing these, it sort of like helped build my confidence to almost like it forced me into scenarios where I had to deal with people and be social again. It I had to, check into hostels, and, you sleep in a hostel as a young 20-year-old, you've got to interact with people. And it built up my confidence to sort of get back out there socially. And the more I experienced, the more I realized no one really cared about how I looked. It didn't matter. If anything, it was like an interesting story if they happened to notice or they asked about it. And the more people I interacted with, the more marathons I was running, and, running next to people, and, oh, why are you running this marathon for? And the more I felt comfortable talking about the story and the reason I was there in the first place. And it was all sort of like massive confidence boosting sort of activities. It was being healthy, being outdoors, seeing new places. It changed my life, and it got to a point where I was starting to go out locally again, and that's where I met my missus, my wife, and we sort of got chatting, and it was actually another event. What ended up happening, I got involved with another charity while I was doing these 100 marathons called Walking with the Wounded, a military charity. And they had just finished an event where they took a group of wounded servicemen to the North Pole. They trekked to the North Pole, and their next sort of challenge was to climb Everest. I was like, I'll get involved with that if I can. So while running these 100 marathons, I was training for and climbing mountains in preparation for Everest. And just as things were looking promising with me and my wife, I had to go away to Everest for 2 months. So the day I got back from Everest, we got together and been together ever since. But it was only doing all these races and being involved with, like, social engagements that give me the courage and the confidence to, interact and be social again.
Yeah. I suppose the more people you maybe restores faith in humanity, right? The more people you interact with, then you realize actually maybe the opinions of the people who are voicing something negative or in an insensitive way, their opinions don't matter.
No.
The opinions of the kids, do their opinions really matter? I mean, they matter in as much as I want to go, hey, how about be better kids? How about bring the neck to the parents and go, your kids need to be more kinder people.
Yeah.
But on the adult side, people like that, your opinions don't matter.
No, but it I felt like it was such an important part of the healing process that, I'm happy that I got to experience those sort of things, because it put things into perspective of what it is and isn't important, and like I say, opinions don't really matter from people if you don't want them to matter.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. It's who you value.
Yeah.
So the opinions of the people that you actually value matter, right?
Yeah.
If your wife turns around and says you're a dick, then you're going to be bothered.
That would matter. That would matter. Yeah.
Or you're being a dick.
Yeah.
Your ears prick up and you go, maybe I'm being a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goodness me. So what's the prep for the marathon tomorrow? Are you gonna? I've done a bit less than a marathon.
Yeah.
Like a military race, but it was like 23, 24 miles different.
Yeah.
Prep wasn't good. I was very young. Prep was absolutely terrible. Prep involved alcohol and the race went well from the finish numbers.
Yeah.
But we were first. It was a team of 3. We were first, but it wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
I couldn't walk for like 3 days after. Lost my toenails and all sorts of stuff. What about you?
This, like, when I mentioned earlier about, like, marathons are being the toughest race in the world, I think anyone can run a marathon. If you've got general fitness, anyone can get through a marathon. And, like, the toughest race in the world is going to be the one that you apply yourself the most to. A 5K can be the toughest race in the world if you're trying to do 5-minute miles. Whereas, like, if you rocked up at a marathon, not fussed about the time, not fussed about how quick you finish, you'll get it done. Like, races aren't hard unless you make them hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's definitely some races out there that are hard, that are very, very difficult, even to just try and coast through. But if you just want to finish, anyone can run a marathon. So, I mean, I feel like I'm in a comfortable position now and a reasonable amount of fitness and mental state that I can turn up and do a marathon without any training.
Really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise that.
No, I wouldn't advise it. I wouldn't advise it, but like I say, I've done 170 of them. So
yeah, you must still be in a pretty good shape after the 500Ks as well. Project Fire and Ice, right?
Yeah. So
you've been ticking over since?
I've been taking, like, I like to go out for a run, but like I shifted from doing city races. So like London Marathon, it's a spectacular race. It really is. And like, I recommend everyone at least trying to do it. I know how difficult it is to get an entry into there, but I'd 100% recommend it to anyone who's never run a marathon before to at least try.
What's so special about it?
It's just massive. It's part of a select few marathons that are considered the world majors, and it brings all the famous marathon runners, all the top elite runners, because there's quite a lot of money involved, like as in prize pots for those who win it. So it's famous in that sort of sense that it attracts the best marathon runners in the world. But now, having done a lot of city races, I made the change from road running to trail running, which I feel suits me so much better, because it's not about finishing times. It's about trying to tackle the terrain that you're running on. And, so like some races, for example, one of the most famous trail races is an ultra race across Mont Blanc called UTMB. That's a 100-mile race around the Mont Blanc Massif. Whereas like the top racers there will probably finish it in about 20 hours, which is fast. Like they do 10,000 meters of elevation climbing. To put that into perspective against the fastest track runner doing 100 miles, they could get it done in about 10 hours. So like, it's almost to do the difference is almost double in finishing time between a road race and a trail race. So like, the more trail races you do, the less important it is to try and do it quickly, because it's just about finishing the race. And that's the sort of style of running that I really enjoy now. You sort of go out into the into the wilderness or whatever, on the trails, and your goal is to actually finish the race. As long as you finish it in a set period of time, it doesn't matter how fast you finish.
Do you think it might lose the appetite for the challenge?
Doing it that style, or
yeah, doing that style, yeah. But also the marathons, to be honest. I mean, it doesn't sound like tomorrow's going to be that challenging for you.
No, it's still great, because like it'll still get to a point where it still hurts. Like I say, the distance never gets any shorter. It's still quite a toll on your body. But what I've learned through all the running that I've done is quitting or stopping. That's sort of the easy way out. Like getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. As long as you can sort of still carry on going forward, even when your body feels like it doesn't want to carry on. As long as you can ignore that voice, you can go forever. Again, as long as you're reasonably healthy and fit. Because like when your body's uncomfortable and it's hurting, you've been on the pavement for like a few hours, your knees are going to start hurting, your ankles are going to hurt. Your body's telling you it wants to stop. Or if you can ignore that, like I said, a few months ago, I did it for 500 kilometers. My body started hurting in the first day, but it's just your mental attitude towards it.
Have you ever thought about doing something like the Talisker Whiskey Challenge?
Is that the rowing?
Yeah, the 3,000 miles.
See, I mean, I'm always up for a challenge, but I think because trying to recover from injury, a lot of that was trying to just ignore the pain, because you're hurting anyway. Like there's no escaping from it. So endurance events are pretty similar. Everyone hurts at some point during these races. As long as you can sort of like put that aside, not let it dominate your thought process and not let that make decisions for you, you can complete these races. That's definitely achievable for almost anyone, I'd say.
Do you prefer the team events or individual?
I, I like both. I mean, I normally tend to go towards the individual, to go off solo, just because I'm happy in my own sort of company. Really, I can. I've got a race coming up in July. It's called Lakeland 100. I've tried this race twice before and I've failed it twice because it's a bit of a beast of a race. It's a 40-hour time limit and it's 105 miles around the Lake District. You end up doing sort of like the same ascent as like Everest, and it's a hard race. You're running through the night. But like I tried it when I probably wasn't as mentally sort of like prepared for it, and now that I've gone through sort of like the fire and ice challenge and know how my body feels after I've pushed it to certain points, I feel like I'm in a much better position now to try and get this done. But yeah, physically, I think I'm.
How did you, when you say you failed it before, you just didn't hit the time, got in but not in the time, or did you not complete the course?
Yeah, one of them was I didn't reach one of the. I was really, really close to one of the cutoffs at the checkpoints, and then like that got me mentally. I was like, I can't do it. And then another one was like I let my body, I let my thought process sort of get the better of me, because I was like, I'm really hurting. My knees and my hips hurt. I've been climbing up and down. My quads are killing because when you're coming down, rocky sort of like hills. I was like, I'm in too much pain. So I pulled out, and then like within 10 minutes after sitting down having a hot brew, I was like, actually, I'm fine. Because like mentally I got myself into a position where I was like, oh my God, I'm hurting so much that I can't go any further.
But how do you overcome that point? So, because you'll have been through that before, right? So,
Yeah.
what do you do to stop that thought winning?
So I just slow everything right down.
Yeah.
Even if it means walking, just slow it down.
As you physically slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Physically slow down. Still move forward. Anyone can carry on moving forward, walking a little bit. And then sort of almost build yourself up for that second wind. It just so happens that like in these really big, long 100-mile races, that you'll get a second wind, then you'll crash again, and then you'll get a third wind, you'll crash again, and you keep going. And it's like a mind game. It's, you know you're going to hurt and you're going to crash. Then you got to suffer through it for a little bit, because, you'll get another pick me up again in a little bit.
So is that a common experience among ultra runners? Is it?
Yeah, like everyone hurts in ultra running.
But I mean that cycle, up down, up down.
Oh yeah, I mean I could definitely say so for myself. But like, reading stories of other ultra runners, no matter if it's like the top end athletes or like the people who turn up to just finish it, everyone's going to hurt, and they will go through cycles of, overcoming that period of struggle, push through it, ride the wave for a little bit, and then they'll crash again a little bit, fight through that, and then it's a great sort of, if there's that famous saying, like, if you want to run a race, I think run a marathon, but if you want to have an experience, run an ultra. It's really interesting.
What's the ultra running community like in the UK? Are they friendly, welcoming community, or is it a bit clicky?
Yeah, no, it's very sort of like open armed sort of community, because those sort of feelings, like we were just talking about, if you're doing ultras, that they'll understand what you're going through, and that's what makes it quite a welcoming community. So, yeah, if you wanted to turn up to one, you'd always find people who are willing to, give you advice, or, run with you for a little bit, or it's a great environment to go out and challenge yourself.
I'm the ultra running osteopath I mentioned to you. I can't remember if I mentioned an icebreaker on this, but I'm actually with him tonight at a friend's birthday party. I have to mention it there because he's kind of similar. I say he's like a similar temperament to yourself. Now, I've not come across many ultra runners, right?
Yeah.
But like with a lot of different sports and high performing things, you find that there are common personas, common character traits, common like not mannerisms, common character traits that gravitate towards these different
Yeah.
things. You know, you think of a football player, you think
Yeah.
you think of a rugby player, and where ultra running is concerned, he seems to me quite similar to yourself. He's
Yeah.
like I don't know, you give off this calmness, this presence, this awareness of oneself,
Yeah.
you know, and I think obviously that's part of the adversity you faced. Well, but I also think that people who spend a lot of time in their own brains,
Yeah.
like dealing with pain,
Yeah.
yeah, which running does, no, my ultra running,
Yeah.
I think that I don't know, it elevates. I think it elevates like your consciousness to a level. Now, I'm saying I've never done what you do. You know, I used to run a lot. Through the pandemic, I picked it back up running. Since I left the military, I picked it back up, and it's something that really helped me in just reconciling thoughts and feelings I had going on. I wasn't very well at the time,
Yeah.
and it really helped me. And I think that's where the ultra running piece comes in. It's like it's hard to explain. I almost want to say it's like is an element of like a monk lifestyle,
Yeah.
monk aspect to it, right? You're spending most of your time willingly in your own head, as if it's a meditation. Would that be fair to say?
Exactly. I mean, that is exactly how it sort of started, because like when I was injured and I knew and was motivated to look after myself, running was what I fell into, because bedbound, couldn't move, legs completely damaged. I couldn't walk for a while. So it started off by like just taking a few little steps around, and then that evolved a little bit into trying to run. And then I was trying to work my body out, with like the whole sweating and trying to regulate my body temperature. And that interested me, and I wanted to push myself. And I got myself to a position where I wanted to run a marathon, because that was the goal in my recovery, because I'd never ran a marathon before I was injured. And I really wanted to do something that I hadn't done when I was technically fully abled and not disabled. And then from there, it just evolved and grew. And before I knew it, I realized that running was like a bit of a therapy. It was something that when life was getting a bit too hard or like overwhelming, that if you run and you exercise, that it was getting to a point where all these little things that I thought bothered me really didn't matter, because when it was getting to a point where it was getting difficult to even put one foot in front of the other, that's what mattered the most at that moment in time. There was no room in my brain to worry about the little things. So like over those years and years, that's how I got to learn more about like my thought process and what really mattered, and just that general awareness of how to sort of find happiness, really, because it really helps put into perspective what's important and what isn't.
Baselines, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Forrest Gump was onto something, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Forrest Gump was onto something.
Yeah. If I could spend my life going for a run every day, I'd do it.
Yeah. I had to, I stopped because I started going for longer distances, and one of my knees didn't like it.
Yeah. So, definitely. And that's why I moved to trails.
Oh,
yeah.
But for that discovery, through what I benefit running and without it, because I used to run with headphones.
Yeah.
I used to go to the gym with headphones, and then I can't remember why I started doing it. I started running without headphones, and I know there's people who listen to this. I've mentioned this before, and they've started doing running without headphones, and they've come back to me and said, "Oh my god, it's like so much better."
Yeah.
Because one of the things we are these days, because of technology and phones. No, we don't allow ourselves time to our brains awake time to process thoughts and feelings and stuff that
Yeah.
we used to. Especially our age when we grew up analog, right? I mean, you're not
Yeah.
that much younger than me. Well,
No,
I mean,
I
you're in
get,
your 30s, I'm in my 40s.
yeah. No, but like there weren't no like smartphones to
No,
idly
you always had
waste your
time
time on.
to
Or,
be in your own mind and think about the interaction you just you just have with X, Y, Z person, family member, whatever, or thinking about what you're going to go and do in work. You go there,
yeah.
or relationships, or what? I mean,
Yeah.
interpersonal relationships when you're younger.
You had time to reflect, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. We've robbed that of ourselves now, and I know Monk when it comes to phones, and I really, if I allowed myself, I could quite happily be doom scrolling on my phone all day,
Yeah.
and I find it really hard not to do that. Like when I go to bed, my phone doesn't come in my room with me.
Yeah.
If that phone goes in my room with me, right, because I'm so weak,
Yeah.
I will be on that phone for half hour, an hour, and then I'm not going to sleep when I wanted to go to sleep, and I actually wake up worse than if I'd not had the phone. I feel groggier in a weird
Yeah.
way. I feel groggier for spending time on my phone. But back to my point of saying now, yeah, I go to the gym now without headphones in. I stopped running. But if I was running, I would do it without headphones in, because the benefit of just being in my own mind, I find, is invaluable.
Yeah.
And I've actually thought a lot of times when, in the past, over the last few years, I thought we're doing little challenges here and there, endurance kind of things like long walks or runs. And I thought, would I want to do that as a team, or would I want to do it on my own?
Yeah.
In which way would I find it easier? And I want to say solo, because I can get into a mindset that I'm controlling most of the time. But then I think also there's something valuable of being part of a team, where, especially as with a military background, you're a cog, so imagine you guys on the Project Fire and Ice, you account for 25% of the likelihood of that team completing that race, that journey, right? Which then, and I think that additional sense of responsibility, I think that can be really good in being able to deal with pain, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there is massive benefit to being a team. So like there is a few more variables that will slow you down. So, everyone has different needs. Everyone needs to go to the bathroom at different times. Some might have a bit of an injury or might have to slow down a little bit, or there's those sort of variables. But then the benefits of being in a team where you can motivate each other when someone is going through that sort of like suffering phase where they're fighting against their sort of like thoughts to slow down or stop, or when you have that added responsibility of on yourself of, like we're saying, I'm part of this team and I don't want to be the member who slows people down. That's motivation in itself. And just being there for each other when you are having a bit of a tough day, because they've probably been having their tough day yesterday or the day before, and they're riding a bit of a wave now, so like they can pick up, help you a little bit and help push you a little bit further. So like the benefits of being with other people, definitely can push you along and motivate you to get like tasks done. So I think I'd have really struggled if I did that Project Fire and Ice on my own. I think that could have been a race that I might have not completed, because 500k is a long distance to be in your head and try and convince yourself that you're not hurting. That might have got the best of me, I reckon. But being in a team, with all those added responsibilities and pressure and motivation and encouragement, that got through it.
I suppose you've also got the varying degrees of experience and knowledge of what you're going through at the time, right? Who is the most experienced in that team in that kind of environment?
So in the environment, I think ultramarathons, I mean, it'd probably be fair to say myself, just knowing like what your body experiences pushing those distances. Aldo's super, switched on when it comes to adventurous environments. He's done a lot. He did some, proper gnarly traverses of like Greenland, and he's done some stuff in the winter. And when he was on skis, he never fell over. So he's good. Fox is mega experienced as well. He was really comfortable on skis, and he's been in those sort of environments. Woody hadn't been in the sort of ice that much, but he picked it up really quick, and he was still a solid team player, and he got through it even without having that sort of exposure.
Had he done endurance before?
Yeah, Woody's he's done lots of sort of like races, and he's done Marathon des Sables as well. And
I forgot he did the Marathon des Sables. Yeah, of course he did. Yeah.
So I mean, like, so each member of the team had definitely been through sort of events and scenarios where they had to be in the right headspace to sort of get themselves through to the other side. So even though the environment might have been different for each of us, from our training and experience perspectives, mentally we was all in the right place as a team to get it done, because we'd done very little training together as a team prior to going out there, which is a big thing when you do an event of that scale. But everyone was so like confident and comfortable, and knowing that we could rely on each other, that we sort of, I wouldn't say sailed through it, because it was still mega hard, but we got through it.
Yeah, it's a big thing getting out together, isn't it? I very early on in the podcast interviewed a guy. His first name is Chris, and I can't remember his second name. But long story short, he was preparing for the Talisker Whiskey Challenge.
Yeah.
And after recording the podcast and before the event actually happened, he ended up pulling out. And the reason being was that he had gone out on a training. I think he was going out as a 2-man crew, him and someone else. And they had gone out on a training row, a night row down. It was only meant to be about 5 miles or something like that, maybe less, off the south coast. And it was the first time he'd gone out with the partner at night in any distance. And they weren't friends before. I don't know how they'd been linked up together.
Yeah.
Long story short, the partner basically had a meltdown. I don't know, like 5 miles. Like, he had to row them both back in.
Yeah.
He's like, oh my God. And I think that's why that's one of the reasons I asked about the Talisker Whiskey Challenge, in that. Well, I think one of my biggest nightmares will be getting onto that boat. And I'm not on my own. With someone else, 2 or 3. I think you got 2 and a 4-man crew in you. I think you got 3, well, 2, 3 or 4. And you find out too late. Like day 2, maybe.
That you don't like
that one of the people on the team,
yeah,
has got some hideous character flaw.
Yeah.
Which either impacts it would, in anything negative would impact the performance of that team over that far. You end up some lunatic, and you've got to put up with it. And I wonder, right? How many teams experience that, get through it, and then they agree at the end, we're never talking about it.
Yeah.
We're never going to mention that.
It's never mentioned again.
Because there must be times as well, and maybe it happens on, I don't know, maybe it happens on on land team endurance events, where someone has a fucking breakdown. Someone literally has a mental breakdown. Maybe for 30 seconds, freaks out, or maybe for an hour, maybe 10 minutes, freaks out because the pressure piles on. Because you see it in the military, you see it in all sorts of different environments.
You really do.
And there's a difference between that happening there and it happening in the middle of the Atlantic.
Yeah, because like on ours, someone keeps falling over. I mean, I fell over so many times in like a short space of time on my skis, and I was snapping a little bit. But like, at least on land, you can just stop for a minute or go off to the side of the path a little bit and have a quiet word with yourself. But you wouldn't be able to do that in the ocean, would you? Yeah. There's nowhere to go.
Why are you falling over? You're not used to skiing? Were you not used to skiing before?
That's like I'm definitely not a good downhill skier, but like Nordic skiing, I'm okay. But when your legs are weak and like you're tired and you're hungry and you're not focusing properly, and the sun's setting, and like the ground's a little bit awkward. Like I just kept falling over at one point.
And the effort it takes to get up.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you got skis attached to you, and you look like a weird crab trying to stand back up. It's yeah. So that people definitely snapped a little bit.
What's the longest event you've done?
So it probably would be far nice, yeah, 500k, 10 days, because like Marathon des Sables and like the jungle, and I did another one similar out in Kenya, which was sort of like a race in a safari at the same time. They were all 250 kilometers. They were, so to do that distance again, that was that was difficult. That was.
What do you think your limit is, distance wise?
I don't know. I think given if you got the time and you've not got a family waiting for you back at home and you don't want to piss them off, I think you can go indefinitely.
What about without sleep? How far could you cover without sleep?
Without sleep. So I've done events before where 2 nights without sleep, where it's hard. You start
hallucinating.
Yeah, you start seeing things. So I did one ultra. It was along the Thames Path, and it was 100 miles. And this one was only 28 hours. This one was, but because the canal towpath, it never changes.
Oh, canal. Where is this?
Along the Thames Path.
Oh, that is the most boring route.
Yeah,
canal, mate.
I don't know why.
Oh God.
But I was just plodding along, questioning all my life choices, and and like your vision, like when you're looking around, it doesn't keep up with what it's almost like if you hear a noise because you've been on your own for 6 hours or whatever, and you hear a scuttling, and like you turn your head, but then your vision's like is slower to catch up, and like shadows seem to move more, and it's really weird and distorted because your body is like proper suffering, and it's such a strange experience that you start thinking there's things there that isn't, because again your brain's like so scattered, it's trying to look for excuses to like be safe and stop.
I've been that tired. No, I was hallucinated only at one time from extreme tiredness, and it was a training exercise. And it was a very hot day when it happened, and we'd just done like a 12-mile insertion with a load of kit, and then we dug like a stage 3 trench. It was just horrendous. Like the first big defensive exercise we'd done in a long time. I think it was, when was it? 2001, 2002, something like that. And long story short, I mean, just a young Tom, young private, boiling hot. We're in these trenches. We've been stood to, and the sun's beating down on us. And I looked across to my right to where the section commander was, a guy called Mal, I think his name was at the time. And I looked over, and he had a Carlsberg beer tent umbrella above him, like giving him shade. He didn't, but that's absolutely what I saw. I was like, what the fuck? And I realized I was hallucinating. I looked back, and in front of me was like a ancillary bag, a bag for keeping bits and bobs in, military bag, green thing. But it was a large bag, and I looked down at it, and it was I didn't see the bag. It looked like a dead head. I looked like like a decapitated head in front of me. I was like, what the fuck? And then realized it wasn't it. Oh my God, I am tired. I am tired. That's the only time I've ever done it. The brain will play tricks on you.
This one crazy time when I hallucinated, it was during one of the bandage changes I had to have when I was in hospital, and it was back when they were giving ketamine for like pain relief, and like I had.
Do they not do that anymore? No,
very rarely, I think. But so to get my bandages changed, I had to be put on a bed which was specially adapted to be rolled under a shower, and then they washed off the bandages, and so I was lying down.
They washed them. They had to soak them so they would not be stuck.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So they gave me a load of ketamine, and I was really nervous because it was really painful. It was, one of them where I didn't want to move because I knew it would hurt. So they gave me loads of ketamine, and rolled into like this weird sort of like washroom sort of style operating theatre, and there was a spotlight down on me, so it was like almost like a stage performance, and like I was shaking and
With nerves,
with nerves, yeah. And my surgeon next to me just kept saying, "It's okay, Carl. It's okay, Carl," and it kept repeating. And I was like, "Hey," it clearly started having an effect on me because like I was like the room started spinning. Think like things just started. My vision started like stretching. It's really weird feeling because like I remember looking down at my feet and like they sort of like were sliding further away, and like I don't think it was the right choice, but like once the dressing was taken off, you know, that I could see my hand and it was like this really deformed, sort of like skinless claw-like hand, and I was starting to hallucinate, and it was like growing claws and everything.
Oh my God.
But like my surgeon was like, I just kept hearing, "It's okay, Carl. It's okay, Carl," and I sort of like almost like just let go, and I let my head fall back, exhausted. And then I was looking up at the ceiling, and this air vent was just talking to me, going, "It's okay, Carl. It's okay, Carl." It was a really weird, surreal experience.
Have you ever done psychedelics?
No.
Would you dabble with it? Like an ayahuasca trip or something? Oh, you don't like the jungle, do you?
No, like I don't think I could trust my thought process to not send me to a really weird, scary place. I mean, I've heard there's been like really good studies like done which has helped people mentally who are struggling with mental health and trauma, but I don't think I could do it.
The charity in the UK, it was actually set up in the US, but it's the UK arm now. And it's the CEO is a guy called Keith Abram. He's an ex-two-part guy, and the charity is called Heroic Hearts.
Yeah.
And they organise like retreats for people with severe mental health, ex-military mainly. They do ayahuasca trips.
Yeah.
Like trips, no pun intended. They do trips to Peru.
Yeah.
Where you go and you literally, it's like 10 days. Ayahuasca. I think you're there for 2 days, like a climatization kind of thing, getting you in the right mental state, chilling out, meeting the group. Then you ayahuasca, and that's a few days, and then, well, however long it lasts, and then you're out. But yeah, you're right. It does have big change. One of the I've done dabbled with dabbled, controlled, sensible over the last few years, a couple of times with acid.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a similar thing.
Do you think it worked? Or
does
helped?
It work?
Or as in helped? Like,
I'd say for me, it changed me.
Yeah.
I want to say life changing. I say perspective changing.
Okay.
In a small perspective shift for me, which has made a major change.
Yeah.
I think much better at managing or not having like anxiety, underlying like chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
Or like a worry, which I had for a long time, unnecessarily. And the reason I brought up the psychedelics is it's kind of I experienced the first time I did it, kind of similar. You're there, you're conscious that you're hallucinating.
Yeah.
But it's extremely real and it's connected to the reality.
Yeah.
So I'm in this room and seeing something which I know is not real, but it is absolutely having an impact on me.
Yeah.
I think it does change you. The thing is with psychedelics is that you need to be in a decent headspace going into it. Like stable, at the very least. Like I know, so for the ayahuasca retreats with Heroic Hearts, for example, I don't think you're going to do that if you've got like heavy alcohol consumption, for example, or you're on antidepressants or these other things. You need to be at some kind of stable. I don't mean stable positive. I mean just kind of stability because of the unpredictability of it.
That's what I was thinking. Like, how would you? I mean, do you have like an element of control about how? Is guiding it the right way of saying it?
I don't know. I've not done it, but I do know that ayahuasca for a lot of people is a real horrific experience, but it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Right? Now, where acid's concerned, I am not advising anyone. I'm no expert at this. If you want experts, go back and listen to any of my psychedelics experts guests I've had on. But you do have control.
Yeah.
So, but you need to prepare yourself before you go into it. So, for example, one of the bits of advice I was given is, if you start experiencing something negative or whatever you're experiencing, don't try and understand it. Don't try and ask why. You just acknowledge that it's happening. It sounds really airy-fairy. Just acknowledge that it's happening and just let it pass.
Just ride with it.
Let it pass. Yeah. And there's only been one moment where I experienced that I was really uncomfortable. It was weird. It was a visualization, and this is the second time I did it. And I was the first time I did it, I was with a friend. We watched movies all afternoon. He was just like, okay, and he hadn't done it since he was younger. I'd never done it. So, okay, let's get into his flat. Let's create a nice calm environment. No alcohol. We're chilled out. Okay, we're both happy. Right, we're doing it. We've got the whole day, so we'll do it like midday. Should wear off, but at the end of the day, we were totally cool. We ended up watching Jessica Chastain movies all afternoon, mate. We got to the point where there was one point where we turned to each other and said, all we need, one of us said it, all we need is Jessica Chastain. That's it. All we need in life. Yeah. And we were absolutely convinced all we need in life is Jessica Chastain. Jessica Chastain.
Brilliant.
It was mental. There was a lot, but that was the one that actually changed me a little bit. There was lots of other stuff that I experienced in my head, you know. But the second one, I did on my own. I let him know. I said, mate, tonight, just FYI. So if anything goes pear-shaped, come and get me. And I put music on. I'd heard like, just stick music on, close your eyes and listen to music. And that was wild. Yeah. While I laid on my couch, eyes closed, wild. The visualizations were unbelievable. Just unbelievable. There was one song, I have it in my favorites on Spotify now, and I'd never heard this song before. And it came on YouTube. I just on YouTube, and I opened my eyes after that song, and for some reason the number is 7. I lived 7 lifetimes during that song. I woke my eyes and gone, I felt like I'd lived 7 lifetimes while in that crazy wild.
Yeah.
But the visualization I didn't like was, it was really brief, and I was kind of looking above like a humanoid kind of figure, like the loose figure of something which has got 2 arms, 2 legs, and like a head, like in the bottom of a pit.
Yeah.
And it started falling away from me. And so it got smaller and smaller and smaller, as if it was dissolving into water, or I was going far away from it.
Yeah.
But I perceived that to be me, and it was like it just was a negative thing. I didn't like it at all. It was a moment where my heart increased. I was like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah.
And I remembered, you're just experiencing it. Like, just acknowledge it's there. You're seeing it. You're trying to understand it. Nothing's really happened to you. And then it disappeared, and I carried on. But it wasn't nice. And I can imagine if you're someone who isn't able to do that, or you're going in the wrong headspace, that's going to be hitting you all the time, because people flip out on it.
Yeah, because I mean, like, it's almost like if you start going down that hole, if you don't catch it quickly, like, how are you going to pull yourself out of it if you get too deep?
Or if you've got loads of insecurities or whatever, or if you're going in trying to fix something.
Yeah.
This is different from the ayahuasca retreats, which are specifically there to try and help you understand.
Yeah.
I think, or give you a different platform on which to view the problem or whatever it is you're trying to overcome, which I think is the benefit of psychedelics in general. I think that was my experience with that trip that changed me positively, is that it literally, I was me, nothing changed about me, but I was looking at myself in the third person. Yeah. I was just looking at the problem from a different angle. Okay, these are the things that again, that anxiety was permanently anxious, permanent, it was horrific. And I was looking at it and looking at myself and going, okay, that's you. What is the problem? What is the issue? There's nothing. There's no need to be like this. You're worrying about things that you don't need to worry about. So that's the benefit of it. Looking at yourself in a different way. But the point is, I didn't go in looking for a fix. Yeah. I went in just going, okay, let's try this out. See what's what. Yeah. If you go in looking to fix something that's wrong with you, insecurities or whatever, I think that creates problems, Yeah. Or you do it in the wrong environment. Yeah. You do it pissed up with a bunch of people pissed up, and you're all in there getting lashed, all on acid. That's a recipe for disaster. Yeah. Things can go wrong. Have you heard of Gaz Walsh? He owns Sin Eaters Guild. Oh, yes. Yeah. So he has smashed psychedelics in the past. Like, he did a few years of, he got into 2-para, then he got out. I think he did a few years of all sorts of stuff, Buddhism and all sorts, and he was smashing psychedelics with a bunch of other people. And he's talked a few times about the importance of having shark watch, basically.
Yeah.
You never do it unless it's someone sober with you.
Okay,
Always.
yeah.
Because if someone goes P-tong,
Yeah.
you've got a major problem because everyone's off in that. And one negative person who's having a bad trip can turn everyone. And then you've got Lord of the Flies in your hands.
Yeah.
You know, and he's described some real bad trips. He's been with people and people have gone real dark. There's not much you can do about it. You know,
it's crazy the power that has over you.
well, your brain can screw you over without psychedelics, right?
Yeah,
People, you know,
definitely.
right. Just extreme paranoia and second guessing everything and thinking X thing is important when actually it's not. Like your appearance.
Yeah, like
there are people who go through life right now. Everything's about the way they look, and they hang everything up. They get a crease in their shirt.
Yeah,
they get dirt in their trainers. They get an eyelash out of place, and it ends their day.
Yeah,
destroys them.
It's fascinating.
You know? Or they come back in from a day, and they realise they've had something on their face all in. No one's told them about it. You know,
yeah.
Or they've had tissue paper hanging off the back of their head or something like that, and then they spend all night not sleeping because of what people must think about them because of that.
Yeah,
in reality, people don't give a shit.
No.
People don't give a shit.
Fascinating. I mean, like, something that I've not properly explored, but I
think Aldo has done ayahuasca, I think, is it not?
I'm not too sure.
Maybe wrong.
So, I mean, other than the experiences of, you know, going through a hospital, I mean, and exhausting myself through ultramarathons to a point where I feel like I'm seeing things, I've not really explored it. But I mean, there was a few times when I was in my 10-day coma that was getting a bit weird, and it weren't, you know, having really crazy dreams or anything. It was because being in a medically induced coma, they can bring you out of it. They start reducing the medication to sort of wake you up, and like I was going in and out of consciousness, and it was like my brain was trying to piece together what had happened. And it, luckily for me, it didn't focus on the injury, even though I was conscious throughout the injury the entire time. So there was no gaps to fill there. So
were you conscious the entire time? You didn't pass out?
Didn't pass out.
Wow.
But like, I think that served me better in the end because, like I said, there was no gaps for my mind to sort of like fill with like nasty sort of thoughts and, you know, so that was fine. When I was coming to from my coma, I was sort of trying to get my bearings where I was. I knew I'd been injured, so I knew I was somewhere in hospital, but I was trying to work out, was I safe or was I not safe? But then I was like, I remember being casevaced and stretchered and being carried to the operating table in Shiber Air Base. So I was like, what was it? So let's just take it back a little bit. What was I doing? We was in the QRF room watching Rocky.
So that evening we were in the same place.
Yeah. So we were watching Rocky on a little crappy little TV with one of the dodgy DVDs that we brought. So I was like, okay, so we're watching Rocky. Then we got deployed. Then I got injured. Don't know what happened in this space here. Now I'm starting to wake up. Am I safe or not? Because I felt like I was gagged because I had a breathing tube down me. So trying to work that out. I didn't have the strength to lift my arms or anything, and I had blankets over me. So I was like, am I tied up? But then, like, I'm quite a rational thinking person. I was like, no, I was definitely casevaced. So I'm in a hospital somewhere. But
could you see?
Not at the time, no. So when I finally woke up, I was still a little bit delirious. And I remember my dad looking over me. He was like, yeah, we're here for you. You know, you're going to be here for a while. So I'll get you a little DVD player and, you know, get you some films and everything. And I don't remember this, but like apparently he was like, what DVD you want? And like all I started doing was singing the Rocky theme tune from watching the DVD. But in between, like as I was starting to wake up, I felt like I was having those sort of experiences where I was like looking down on me, but I couldn't really see my face because I didn't know what my face looked like. But it was weird. It was like I knew that was me, when I was trying to work out where I was, it was almost like I was trying to work out where I was from like different angles of like the room. It was almost like I was trying to paint a picture, almost like I was walking around the room to try and look at it from different angles to like to work out where I was. And so and I don't think I got it too far wrong when I did wake up, because I must have been waking up at points, having a brief look here and there, but like I couldn't remember analysing the room, so to speak. But I think that was the power of the drugs that were running through me.
Have you ever heard of intensive care psychosis?
I've not heard of that.
So apparently, I think it's 1 in 3 or maybe 1 in 5 people go through this. But I interviewed a guy called Aaron Welsh.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book about it. He's ex-military, and he ended up in an induced coma. I can't remember how long it was, but it was random. He was gardening.
Yeah.
And he ended up, and apparently there's bacteria in all of our gardens and all of our soil. And he got this bacteria into his skin from a thorn or something. I can't remember what it was from. But intense pain, intense infection, nearly lost his arm. Nearly died, actually.
Yeah.
Intensive care psychosis is where, when you're under intensive care, you basically go into a nightmare state. You live in a nightmare. And I think he was under for 5 days maybe. But his book is about his experience in intensive care psychosis of 3 months. So he went through a living nightmare for 3 months. And it is horrific. The thing, it basically screwed him up when he came out of intensive care, when he came out of the induced coma, because he was going crazy. He thought people were trying to kill him when he woke up, and just mental. And then trying to reconcile all those things he'd experienced in the induced, intensive care psychosis. I mean, the grim things that he describes that he went through. But when you were talking about that, then I was thinking, my God, maybe you were lucky there when it got a bit dark.
I think I was, because maybe like you were lucky. Some of the guys, you know, like if they've been like in an explosion or something, and they're knocked unconscious straight away, and then the next thing they know, they're waking up with like faces looking down on them, where they're actually doctors or nurses or carers or whatever, but like the last thing they remember was being in a war zone. I've heard some of the guys proper kicking off.
Do you know Stuart Hale?
Yeah, I've heard.
Amputee lost his leg in Kajaki. I know when he woke up, he thought they were trying to kill him. Like he went crazy.
Yeah,
thought they were trying to kill him. I think, but that's because he went from being in a minefield in Kajaki to hospital in Selly.
Yeah,
you know.
But that's why I think it was a benefit that I remember everything from my incident.
I'm amazed he didn't pass out from that.
Yeah, I mean the one bit of time that I sort of had a wobble and lost conscious briefly was I pulled myself out of the Warrior, and then I just rolled on the floor, and that's because I was holding my breath. So for about 30 to 40 seconds, I'd been holding my breath, managed to get out of the Warrior, you know, on fire, and I had a wobble, rolled down off the Warrior, and then hit the floor, and then I was just lying there.
So that must have saved your lungs then, surely, holding your breath.
Yeah, I had very minor sort of burn injuries. My inside of my mouth down to my sort of like esophagus, a little bit in my lungs, but it was very minor.
So was that part of training to be taught to hold your breath in that situation, or was it just instinctive?
Instinctive.
Smoke.
Well, at first I was screaming, so I couldn't hold my breath then. But after that, when I started to sort of think a bit more clearly, a bit more rationally, when I was on fire, because initially overwhelmed by panic, then it was like sort of like almost like a tense up, you know, hold your breath, realise that I needed to get out, and then sort of sort myself out. So yeah, but it definitely did save my lungs.
Would you let your kids drive?
Been long discussions about this.
With who?
Me and the wife. So yeah, I've got a son, and it is a delicate subject.
To talk about this.
Yeah. I mean, it is a delicate subject, and I accept and understand that I've had a bad experience. I've had a bad day in my military career, which happened to affect the rest of my life.
That is simplifying it
yeah.
somewhat. Okay, all right, yeah,
That's not going to happen to everyone who joins the military. So if my son wanted to join the military, I wouldn't stop him. But I'm in a better position to be able to give him all the benefits and all the negatives. So, you know, what it's like having a military life, you know, all the traveling that you get to do, which is a good thing, but can be a bad thing. The risks involved, you know, if we end up going into another conflict, like chances are you'd end up going. And with it comes that element of danger of not only losing your life, but sometimes it's worse that you get like a life altering injury that, you know, could take away everything that you've ever known and loved. So there's pros and cons, but I don't think I'd stop him.
yeah. I know what you mean. I've got kids, and one of them was talking about joining up.
What's your advice?
I don't want to stop. For either of my kids, I don't want to. You know, I'm a believer now, and I wasn't like this before. But I'm a believer that you are most likely to succeed in and enjoy doing. Well, you succeed in what you enjoy doing. Right? Yeah. So I'm okay with it, but I've got daughters, and I think it's a different thing. Daughters do, I think, compared to men, sons.
Yeah.
For a variety of different reasons. And it all depends on what unit as well, Carl. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There is a part of me that wishes that it's like, oh, go on, join the Paras.
Yeah.
As not as an officer, as a Tom. Yeah, and going to be the first female through Para Depot.
Yeah.
Because we've had females in now, but they're officers, right? In do it properly.
Yeah.
Do it properly and be the first one. Like, yeah. But also I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I'm right with it, I think. But I do think that we're probably heading into a period now where, or we are in a period now where the operational tempo is really low, and the military is not a great place to be when the operational tempo is low.
Yeah.
It's just not enjoyable. It's bullshit everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, you and I joined up at a time where the operational tempo was high.
Yeah.
And the military tends to value the things that are actually important. And I think you get treated a lot differently to when the operational tempo is low.
Yeah.
That's bullshit. You know?
Yeah. And I think it's a tough one as well, because like, you know, the military is not easy. It's hard, isn't it? You know, there's elements of it where, like, you know, you're putting yourself into a position where you are going to get beasted, you are going to feel uncomfortable, you are going to be doing things that you wish you was elsewhere. And like, part of me thinks, you know, do I want my child to suffer like that? Which is, but then you realize that like that's made me who I am. You know,
you discover your limits, right? You discover what you're capable of. We were talking earlier on about, or maybe on the icebreaker, about, you know, people basically being able to get injured or being ill or whatever, of a disease or a mental illness, and be able to just sit in their laurels, not do anything about it, and just do the minimal and be able to get through life because of welfare state, right?
Yeah.
They're not achieving their potential, and they're not pushing themselves to the limits. And when they have hardship pop up, the only hardship they ever deal with is real life hardship, not manufactured. It's not because they're going to do a tough session in the gym, or, you know, like the marathon disciples. It's not because they're choosing to test themselves. So the only time they ever get to experience is adversity is in real life adversity, which means they're not ready for it.
Yeah.
Which means they deal with it really poorly and it affects them worse. You know, they have a poorer quality of life because of it. They're sadder than the average person would be because of it. And I don't think it's right. You know, I think everyone should go and test themselves regularly in whatever way, shape, or form we can do that. There's so many ways to do it. And that's what I like about the military side. I think it pushes you to the extreme. even if the only thing you ever did was go to training and then leave training, and that's it. You've pushed yourself to a limit, or been pushed to a limit, which we wouldn't have done otherwise.
Yeah.
Physically most of the time, but that means you're pushing to a mental limit too. Makes me think about national service.
Yeah.
Pros and cons of that. I think it'd be great for society. It wouldn't be great for military standards generally, but it'd be great for society, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something we need now. I don't know. What do you think about it?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because we mentioned earlier that, we know people in the military who probably wasn't best suited for the military. So you probably get a lot of that. But I do think it would, I don't know, I think it would help people, explore their limits, know what they're really capable of, because you don't really discover that until you are pushed. And if you're not pushed, which a lot of people can go through life without getting there, you never really truly appreciate what you're capable of.
No, it's a shame, because I think every single human being's got something to give.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and very few people are able to achieve their potential. And I'm not talking about making loads of money and X, Y, Z. I mean just having a fulfilling, meaningful life to you.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. Whatever that may be. That could be going to sit in the cabin in the woods somewhere and doing nothing and just reading books all day. Cool, whatever.
Yeah.
Someone else could be going to start a multi-million-dollar business. Someone else could be being the best father, daughter, mother, sister, cousin, auntie, friend they can, But
yeah, I mean, like we mentioned on the icebreaker, when I was in that hospital bed, I did not care about how much money I should be earning, like what cars I should be driving, what clothes I should be wearing. The only thing that's absolutely terrified me was how much time I was going to lose, because I thought I was going to die, and I thought that was it. Time was the thing that I was scared about losing. Nothing material. It was like, I wish I had time now to do things that I really wanted to do, because I thought I was losing it. I thought it was getting taken away from me. So like that whole idea of, I mean, for me, again, if it's what you do and what you love, fair play to you. But yeah, for me, it was all about, from that moment on, trying to make each and every day as fulfilling as possible and not let a second pass, not let a second go to waste.
Excellent advice. And on that note, mate, I think we're going to wrap it up. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to cover? I think you got through it all right.
That was good. That was, yeah.
So when people listen to this, the marathon will be complete tomorrow. I hope we finish it.
Me too. I'm giving it all big licks now. And
yeah, good luck with it tomorrow, mate. And the Kazavat Club. Good luck with it.
Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure, mate. Anytime you're down here, let us know and we'll get something done.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Yeah, sweet. Nice one. Good luck with everything.